Hi, welcome to Riffs on Writing, where we talk about your writing and publishing questions in 10 minutes or less. And today we're going to talk about memoir and the story behind the story.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that memoir gets criticized for a lot is this sort of navel gazing aspect, right? Like it's just talking about yourself for the sake of talking about yourself. Um, but really good memoir has this deeper meaning, like this personal story that can be extrapolated out to the larger world.
Yeah, and I think everybody thinks their story is interesting, but the fact is it's not. And I know that sounds mean, but for the most part, your story might be chat over great chat over coffee or drinks with your friends, but past that, it really isn't that interesting. And I think unless you've done something that is absolutely incredible, in which case you get a pass. But for the most part, our stories are not really that interesting. So this is a way to find that connection with the outside world. That's what you're looking for in a good memoir, so that even if your story is different, I can see myself in your story and I can connect with you as your reader.
Yeah, a memoir I really like is "The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down" by Anne Fadiman or Fadiman or Fadiman or something that Caroline would say very differently than I would. But it's the story of a young Hmong girl who has seizures, and there's a cultural conflict around her illness because her family and her Hmong culture say it's a religious, like a spiritual ailment, and Western medicine, they're in California, says it's a physical ailment. And so the book is about extrapolating from this particular child's experience into this larger story about cultural difference. And the writing is beautiful and it's lovely, but it is not it is not navel gazing. It is not just about Anne Fadiman's experience of this. It's about this larger story.
Absolutely. And I think if and it can be hard. It can be hard to do that. I think when you're approaching a memoir, to be thinking, because you almost have to have like two trains of thought in parallel. One about your story and two about how it relates to the world. So I can just talk about my book just because it's on my mind right now. But because I talk about my grandparents and I talk about I'll cover my experience, never mind the family part, but my experience of selling everything, moving to Poland for 4.5 years. You know what? People do that all the time. And Poland is not this country. It's not some deserted island where I had to build my house out of sand and leaves. I mean, it's by any standard, it's a very modern country that has everything, great internet, all of it. So there were no hardships that I had to overcome, but there were cultural things that I did have to overcome, cultural differences, even though I am Polish. And I had to look at those and then think about how people feel when they come to Canada, for example, and compare. And so I think what can happen is anybody who's ever immigrated anywhere can now find parallels and say, hey, I had a similar experience. And it might be something so simple as when I moved there, I was looking for tomato sauce and I couldn't find tomato sauce that wasn't sweetened. And, at the time, like now I can laugh about it. At the time, it was horrible. It was this insurmountable problem that I had. And it was my problem. It was definitely my issue because I just didn't like what they had in the store. So, but, anybody can understand that. Anybody coming to Canada or the US is going to look for flavors they understand. So you can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of a person I knew who had never been out of the south of the US. And we went to Pennsylvania and he ordered tea and it wasn't sweetened. And he literally didn't know that was possible. It's
Right.
very small, but it's true. Yeah. Another memoir that does this really well is Gail Brandeis's The Art of Misdiagnosis, which is a braided narrative. So if you're interested in narrative structure, that's an interesting one. But it takes the story of her mother's suicide and the story of Gail's Munchausen's like experience as a child with her mother, and then also Gail is giving birth to her son during the
Yeah.
period of time. And so there's this lovely thread about mothering, but it's also much more about self-identity and compassion and grace and boundaries and mental health and all of these things. Excuse me. And yet it's incredibly personal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the strange irony of memoir, is that, yeah, there it is. Oh, and yes, the situation in the story. So if you want a craft book, Vivian Gornick's The Situation in the Story is the book to read,
Yeah.
because it is all about the situation, which is the personal, and the story, which is the thing that is larger and more universal. And the irony of it is, to be more universal, you need to be really specific,
Yes.
but you also have to keep an eye, keep a mind, as Caroline said, that second mind on the reader, so that it's working for them too.
And there you go. I think we covered that. If you have any questions or you want more clarification, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we would be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you. See you next time. And don't forget to tell everybody about our show.